A few months ago, we decided that we would take some of the letters that we received from people asking me questions, get approval from them if we thought the questions applied to a lot of people, get approval for me just to respond to those questions and make the answers available to everybody through these chats. And so we got permission from some people. And so today I want to look at a letter that we received from somebody that is going to go by Juls. And it says this: Dear Tim, I'm a woman in my early 60s who has carried unhealed childhood trauma for most of my life. I now understand that many of my struggles line up with complex PTSD, though it went undiagnosed for decades. When I was very young, I was sexually abused by a family member. I was too little to understand what was happening, and my memories from them come mostly in fragments and flashbacks. I never told my parents or friends. For most of my adult life, I mentioned only the smallest hint of it to my husband, and even then, without details. About 4 years ago, during marriage counseling, I finally opened up to him fully. It felt like unlocking a box I had kept sealed for my entire life. After that, I searched for my own therapist and eventually found someone who is trauma-informed. I have tried to make peace with what happened. Within the past year and a half, I had a conversation with my family member and offered forgiveness. I also shared the truth with my siblings. Both of my parents have passed, but one of my memories suggests that they became aware something had happened, even though it was never acknowledged or spoken about. I think they hoped I would forget because I was so young. Only now am I truly understanding the emotional, mental, and physical effects that came from keeping this inside for so many years. I have lived with hypervigilance, emotional overwhelm, a strong startle response, memory issues, difficulty trusting, relationship struggles, low self-esteem, and several health challenges. I also believe the trauma at such a young age impacted parts of my development, and I've always struggled with reading, following written instructions, and impulsivity. I recently began EMDR with my trauma therapist, and I am hopeful it will help me with the flashbacks, my emotions, and the startle response. To add another layer, I had surgery this past summer, and the healing has been complicated. My care team is considering whether I may have a nerve-related pain condition called CRPS, though I am not convinced that it is what is going on. Question: do you think EMDR will help with my startle response? And do you think I should address CRPS if I even have it with EMDR? How does that work? Juls. So again, let me say up front, what I would do at this point if I was meeting with Juls personally would really be to explore her family life beyond just the sexual abuse trauma that she went through, her mom and dad, the dynamics of their family system, and really try to understand what else made up that family life that contributed to Juls feeling she couldn't talk about the sexual abuse, the parents knowing about it and not talking about it, and then look at other things that might have happened that just were added on to that original trauma, and then to all of the different maladaptations that came out of all of that. But I don't have that opportunity. And so I'm going to just try to respond to what Jules has said and make some observations as we go. What I would like to say up front is, to me, Jules, you've got really good insights into stuff. I'm kind of assuming it's come through your therapy or through watching some of the YouTube videos, and you've begun to understand that sexual abuse has ramifications into all areas of your life, physically, mentally, emotionally, and it's just been massive for you. And you've been starting to work on that. Or the second thing I want to say is that sexual abuse to me is one of the big T traumas that sadly is a lot more prevalent than the statistics say. And the damage that it does long into adult life and into intimate relationships is profound. And so I'm so glad that you're working on it. I really hope that as you continue to work on it, you just continue to find more and more healing. But it is one of the biggies in the trauma world. The second thing that I think is important to say is that EMDR, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, is becoming a very popular treatment modality that many are using. And you've asked about it, and I want to talk to you about it because to me, it's a wonderful modality that's got many benefits, but you need to understand some of the limitations of it. So let me start with this CRPS, or complex regional pain syndrome. So chronic pain, basically. Here's what I would explore. I would really want to find out, how bad is the pain? Is it something that you can live with comfortably, tolerate? It doesn't really inhibit your life? Or is it something that is debilitating, that is really disrupting your life? That to me would be a starting point in understanding this. But then I think it's so important to understand is what we know about trauma and the brain is that for complex trauma, sexual abuse is part of that. Often it happens at a pre-verbal stage in life when you aren't able to talk about it. Either you don't have the words or you're afraid to talk to the adults of your life about it. And so it remains unprocessed. And so the brain now has this unprocessed trauma that it can't find the proper outlet for so it can resolve it. And so what does it do? It stores it in the body. And so many people with early childhood trauma end up with physical symptoms. Pain is one of them, and that they don't even know where it comes from. And so they go to the doctor, and the doctor gives them kind of medications and stuff that deals with the symptoms, but doesn't really acknowledge that this is unprocessed trauma that was stored in the body. So let me just share this. We have had a staff member who went through our program first. We trained her. She had had migraine headaches for years. Gone to doctors, got all kinds of medications, treatments, but they still were there that she had to take medications for. She went through our program and began dealing with the deep trauma that she had never dealt with before. And one day she came to a staff meeting and she said, I just realized that I haven't had a migraine in several months. What she was realizing is that when you deal with the trauma, not the symptoms, when you deal with the trauma, you heal at that level, but then a byproduct of that is that some of the physical stuff is released from the body because you're dealing with the trauma. And so that's where EMDR could help in really getting through the trauma, healing the trauma, and then you would just start to see less pain in your body. So to me, there's an element here of this chronic pain stuff that has a trauma component. I think just to be aware is that if you don't go that route, you still have the medical route, and it's going to help alleviate some of the symptoms, but often there's side effects that you then have to deal with that are very frustrating. So I would be open to a medical solution, but I would definitely encourage you to really work through the trauma. And so many, again, have found that you need more than just a simple modality like EMDR to get to the real thorough dealing with the underlying trauma. It's not just a reprocessing of the memories. It's learning how that trauma shaped you in all areas of life. It's really healing the shame, the abandonment, the fear stuff. All of the deep wounds becomes an important part. And that's where, again, I would encourage you to consider a program like our LIFT program where you could really begin to do that deep dive into understanding and healing the trauma. And then I would expect you will find some of the pain will, as a byproduct, will begin to lessen. So let me come to EMDR. So for those who aren't familiar with it, EMDR is really recognizing that a person, a child in trauma, they get locked into the memory of that trauma, seeing it a certain way, and they need a way to be able to reprocess it from different perspectives. And so eye movement is, if you look one way, then you look the other way, well, this memory is coming. You then are accessing different parts of the brain. It's bilateral parts of the brain that you are accessing, and that helps to regulate the emotions so that the memory is not so intense. That helps you process it by looking at it through different eyes than just the child's eyes, and that helps you then resolve the trauma. So what I have found, and a couple things here, is that some EMDR therapists who say they're trauma informed are really just big T trauma informed. They really don't understand the subtle nuances of little t trauma and the massive ramifications into a person's life. I think you need a therapist who understands little t trauma well. And that leads to the second thing, is many EMDR therapists, sadly, just think that if they can take you back through the memory and process it using EMDR, that's all the work that you're going to need to do. It's somehow going to fix you. What they're not recognizing is that when you lived in complex trauma, ongoing danger, where that wasn't just a one-time event, but you were living in adaptations all the time to survive, is that kind of wrote programs in your subconscious brain that were unhealthy, that created life traps today, prisons, cycles of coping and behaviors that continue to hurt you and hurt those that you love. You need more than just the EMDR is what I'm saying. EMDR is great in helping people. It's scientifically proven as a wonderful modality to help people process through the memories of the trauma. But please go beyond that. There's so much more that needs to be looked at and explored and understood for a person to truly heal. It's not just about healing the memory, it's healing the whole way of life that came out of that trauma. All the lies that you began to believe, all of the maladaptive ways of coping that became part of your life. And then you have to begin to learn what healthy looks like and what healthy tools are like, so that you can begin to change. EMDR doesn't provide all of that extra stuff. So use EMDR, yes, but don't see it as a magic fix or all that you need. So much more is needed. Beyond that, what I would just say is what I have found for many people with sexual abuse, severe sexual abuse stuff, is you need to begin with a therapist. Absolutely. That's your safe person. They can work with you through stuff, but you then need a deep dive into all of the trauma of your childhood, understanding all the dynamics that made it happen. Because in your situation, it wasn't just that you were sexually abused, it's that you didn't feel you could talk about it. You felt alone. That's where the trauma took place. So now it was you as a little child carrying all of this stuff with nobody to help you with it. So why was that? You need to be able to explore that. And then you need to be able to find healthy connections where you feel supported, where you can walk with others that get what you're going through, who've been there. That becomes such an important part of the healing journey. So I hope that helps in answering your question. The bottom line again is EMDR is fantastic. Use it, but don't think that's all you need to use. There's so much more that needs to be done besides just the EMDR portion if you're going to truly heal and become a healthy person. Thank you again for being here. If this was helpful, please like, subscribe, share, make a comment. We really appreciate it. Until next time, have a great day.